media to see what we're up to.
Hello to our dear and distinguished audience, and welcome to the second panel of BlockSec Digital Stage 2020 second day. My name is Eline Chivot. I'm a policy analyst for the DC and Brussels-based think tank Center for Data Innovation, and it's a pleasure to be your host for this interesting and timely panel discussion called AI Will Enable a Sustainable Future. To the participants attending, please feel free to type your questions via the conference platform. There is also a couple of poll questions related to the session to make it a little bit more interactive. A bit of background on today's session. First, we are facing environmental challenges like climate change and the loss of biodiversity. And one of the solutions to help us through it is to harness the potential of emerging technologies. And if you think of public policy priorities at EU level, for instance, speaking to you from Brussels, green and digital are the two priorities of the current Commission. As advances in AI could really help achieve the objectives of the Green Deal and success and competitiveness in the data economy, especially post-COVID. There are several such technologies that look like promising candidates for the next innovation wave, and in the context of achieving more sustainable, sustainably developed economy and society. There's IoT, robotics, blockchain, autonomous devices, and AI. And perhaps AI is the most important one. It's already deployed in a wide range of economic sector to contribute to managing environmental impacts and climate change. Think of applications such as precision agriculture, sustainable supply chains, environmental monitoring, and hence climate modeling and disaster prediction as well. These applications are broadening, and there can be more to it in the near future. So how is and can AI be a driver of economic growth while serving the objective of climate neutrality and the reduction of emissions? What is the business and policy perspective of stakeholders in the space, such as startups, scale-ups, investors, business strategists, and larger corporations? What role are these stakeholders playing? With me today, we have three great speakers, which I will ask a few questions to before we move to a conversation, questions and answers from the audience. First, Ines Leonarduzzi, your founder and chief executive officer of Digital for the Planet, and an expert in digital strategy, AI implementation, and blockchain. We have also with us Jacques Buguin. You're an investor, CEO and founder of Macon Advisory, an economic policy and management advisory firm. And you're also a former director of the McKinsey Global Institute and a venture partner in investment firms. And last but not least, we have Edward Zhao, Vice President of Global Government Affairs for Huawei, and your team is leading the company's progress in sustainable development for AI as a policy area. Now, jumping right through the conversation, why are we talking about emerging technologies like AI or even blockchain in the context of environmental sustainability, green public policies, and corporate responsibility? Why does it matter for businesses? What is the promise? Maybe going first to you, Jacques.
Thanks, Eline, for the introduction. I guess the reason why today the two axes of technologies and sustainabilities are so much a hot topic is, as you said, AI is typically the next wave of digital technologies, and especially the breakthrough is coming via deep learning, and the technology is becoming extremely effective in finding solutions for complex problems of which we need a solution. And indeed, as we know, the problem of sustainability is a very complex, multi-dimensional problems that we are going to face. And indeed, we hope that the AI will be one of the technologies, of the promising technologies, to help solve some of those issues. Now, just to give an example, if you think about sustainability, you need at least to discover, let's say, real-time patterns in climate change. And it was not possible before because not only you didn't get the data, but today not only you have the data, but you can simulate non-linear system dynamics that will require machine learning techniques to solve the insight that you can emerge, that you can find emerging from the data. And that's exactly where AI can play. Now, the second reason why this is so hot at this stage is that not only sustainability is a hot topic, but I think there is an awareness that the operating model, if I call it this way, of economics has been depleting resource too fast, and energy fuels overheat the planet. And we all know what's happening with the global warming. Now, the fundamental question of the global warming is not what's going to happen by 2030. We all know that people say, look, at least by 2030, we could be hitting the threshold of the 1.5 degrees Celsius a temperature higher than what it is today. But what people start to realize at this stage is that when we come to that level, if the impact on GDP and well-being, which I estimate to be, for 1 degree of extra warming to be 0.2, 0.5 points of GDP, it could be 3 to 5 times larger when you hit the threshold. So imagine that this is the case. That means it's a -2, -3% a year of impact on GDP, possibly half what we have found from the COVID at this stage. So that means that it's a significant impact, and people realize that we're going to need faster commitment than what has been done at the Paris Agreement. And at the end of the day, that means that people need to find solution, and AI is part of that. Finally, COVID is there, and COVID has basically shown the way. They basically, what COVID means is simply the realization that a global pandemic can hurt, and it really hurts everyone. And people come to realize that if you do not accelerate on the issue of sustainability, we will be facing a war soon, and something which is as damaging, as uncomfortable as what we have just noticed with the COVID itself. So there as well, the hope is that a technology like AI can help a quick fix. And as AI contributes already to secure many things, by the way, on automation, online shopping, robotics, as you mentioned, and remote work. I would not to say that, and by the way, this is not only a question about the general public. You talk, Eileen, about cooperation. And I will argue that cooperation basically understand that this is quite important. First, the market, for the first time, is actually pricing the risk of sustainability as heavily as what we've seen for the COVID. Typically, academic research tells us that 1 to 1.5 points of return today is explained by the resilience to COVID for any performance of firms. That's a significant number. This echoes pretty much the difference in return that we got for a company that happened to be very CSR compliant versus not. So that pretty much means that it's quite big. Last but not least, it's not only a question of threats, it's a question of opportunities. Today, companies can brand their activities as caring for more human causes than just selling products. And it's not only a branding. We all know that companies can be better off if they diversify and build new sustainable and greener products advantage towards, by the way, a segment of the population today that have both some purchasing power and a real dogma towards more sustainability. And finally, here's the good news. We all talk about sustainability as a complex problem from the corporate world. At the end of the day, if you think about recycling especially recycling, it can help a lot of resource saving, and the cost economic of the equations is actually quite good.
Thank you very much, Jacques. That was a very comprehensive overview of some of the the drivers behind the use of this technology and its promise, I'd like to turn to Ines to collect your thoughts. As you know, your company is called Digital for the Planet, so obviously it is sustainability and technology is at the core of what you do. So I wanted to know your take on the promise of the technology that you see every day in your work, some of the drivers behind its growth and its potential, but also maybe some obstacles. I know that Jacques talked about data. Maybe that's something you might be able to say to share something about. And perhaps do you concur that within the current context, which is the one of COVID, that technology has gained significant importance? I know that's debatable, but I'd like to know your thoughts on that.
Like you said, indeed, Jacques has been quite exhaustive on the importance of data can do today thanks to AI, and also the context with COVID-19. But I will add some thought about blockchain and how can blockchain, as you ask initially, can help about sustainability. First, we maybe have to what it is or what it's for. Blockchain offers a system of recording information on a way that makes it very difficult, nearly impossible to alter or hack. That's because record of every new transaction needs to be added to each of the ledger that can be hundreds or thousands before transaction is verified. And blockchain is having actually an emerging role in sustainability by helping foster collaboration between customers and producers, by people in adopting more sustainable lifestyle, but also by helping companies improve their sourcing and recycling practice. To be more specific, and another measure benefit, so it can ensure transparency. That means company claims of being resource positive and reducing their environment impact can be counter-checked and verified, which is quite important when that 60% of customers are likelier to buy products with verified sustainable practices. That's what I could share about blockchain for now. Maybe I would like to save some time for Edward, and maybe you can continue. I know you have more questions after.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes, turning to you, Edward. So of Huawei, I'm sure that sustainability is on the agenda of your corporation, as it is on many others. What are the trends that you see? What are the promises that you see? What are some of the use cases, the technologies that you see really are helpful towards achieving climate neutrality and sustainability?
Yes, thank you very much. Helena, I think you're right that the artificial intelligence has kind of general purpose technologies. So we believe that it can be used in many industries, in all the sectors. And especially you mentioned that, yes, as a large corporate, Huawei also we have our own sustainability strategy in line with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. So we set including the digital inclusive, security and trustworthiness, environmental protection, and also the healthy and harmonized ecosystems. This is our sustainability report of 2019. And also in 2019, we released our Tech for All action plan. So that is very important for us to know, which we can extend our environmental work to enable the protection of the fragile environments. So we work together with the Rainforest Connection, which is a non-profit organization that upcycle our old phone, the Huawei old cell phones, into the solar-powered guardians that are placed into the rainforest, collecting the environmental sounds and upload them into the cloud. So the data is analyzed by the AI systems to assist in conservation of the efforts in the rainforest and protect the rainforest. So, and also the animals from the illegal logging and some other illegal activities. So this model is now being used in more than 10 countries. So we are trying to extend this to 6,000 square kilometers protected areas by the end of 2020. And also, thanks to the AI technologies, we believe that can help significantly to protect the environment. So this is some kind of use cases we believe can bring to the industry, can bring to the society, which prove that the AI also can be used widely in the sustainabilities. Thank you, Elena.
Thank you. Thank you, Edward. I have a follow-up question, if I may. You mentioned deployment of some use cases in various countries. My question would be, do you see any trend in particular countries or regions that you see are really on top of using AI in sustainable towards achieving sustainable development? Are there some regions that are lagging behind where awareness may be less strong? Could you share something about that?
Well, I think now that oh yes, please.
The question was for Edward, but doesn't matter.
Go ahead, Edward.
Oh yes, I think yes, the requirements that come from many different regions. Yes, now we are setting up our action plan to work in some rain forest, but also we do believe the solutions can be used to protect some other environments, such as under the sea, because the mechanism is quite simple. We monitoring the sound and uploads the data, then the system can distinguish or recognize the sounds of the activities. So it can take action after that. So this is the mechanism. We can see that for the rainforest and the sea and under the ocean. So this is a kind of activities we are working on. Well, also I know that in Europe, this is a very hot topic to protect the environment. So we do believe this system, this solution can be used widely.
Thank you. Jacques, some sort of a related question, twofold. What are the sectors that you see in the economy that are really at the forefront when it comes to adopting AI for this sort of, tackling environmental challenges? And another part of the question would be, as you're an investor, how do you determine when it's worth funding research and development in this field?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. So first of all, I think from a thesis point of view, as I said, the corporate world basically started to realize that the price of unsustainable business model but unsustainability resource is actually equivalent. So at the end of the day, what we see is that corporations are actually putting that on the agenda. That's a good news. And on top of that, obviously, they will use any means, and means could be digitalization, could be whatever materials they have in hand, and obviously AI. Now, if you look at the evolution, we all know what the key cases will be. The key case obviously happens to be the transport side. And by the way, the transport, the first element of reducing, let's say, gas emission, for instance, is to shift to electricity. But the second case, obviously, which is slightly smaller in size, is what we see today, which is the competitions towards having cars that are autonomous. The reason being, when you have autonomous car and you can basically have the flow much more easier in terms of the traffic, you optimize urban transport to route and traffic optimization, and you save quite a lot. So we see in transport, this is a case where the use case is well defined. You see the same in energy, where energy is obviously 50% of the cost of what we see in terms of emissions. So there as well, distributed energy grids, for instance, and AI will be quite terrific. And you talked already about smart agriculture and food systems. So these three sectors should be at the forefront of doing that. Now, the interesting thing, if you look at AI, because these, let's call them the most polluting sectors, they are industrial based, they are resource extraction based, they are transport based or energy based. Most of the time, they are not necessarily service based like we see in media, like in telecom and the like. Otherwise stated, they lag behind in AI. So there is a bit of an interesting point here where, in fact, the AI adoption savviness or speed of adoption of AI is slightly negatively correlated with the sectors that need the most, or they will benefit the most from the system of depolluting. Now, that's important, but in general, I will say that this is one way to look. The other way to look is that you have to look within the industry. And within the industry, what we find is that there are really three types of companies. Some that are not AI heavy, that not necessarily having a sustainability agenda, calling the laggers, calling the old world, but they're likely not to be in good shape in a 5 to 10 years time. There are obviously the one in the middle that possibly have a bit of digital savviness. They think about sustainability, but they are doing that in a light touch use case. So these guys are pretty much the natural incumbents. They do things, but they do it at the margin. They don't do it at scale. I don't think they will move the needle, but at least they try. And finally, you got the guys that really do push that as a leadership model and push AI and sustainability as part of the corporate agenda. Now, who are those companies? We all know them. They are the Tesla of these words, because obviously they want to revolutionize a full industry. So they will invest in electricity with the battery, and they will obviously invest in autonomous car to transform the transport electricity. And so, in fact, what we have to look, it's much more about who these digital reinventors will be, because these guys typically have the AI capabilities, and on top of that, find in sustainability a great way to disrupt and to be compliant with the necessity to be carbon neutral, if you like, or even extremely friendly in terms of resource depletion. And last but not least, because you asked the question, because your question about AI and sustainability, is it always positive? No. We all know today that most of the models of AI need to train a lot of data, and usually some of the algorithms are not necessarily that effective at this stage. So they use the brutal force of the network, the cloud, to basically run algorithms and train the data to find an algorithm that's extremely energy intensive. In some cases, some researchers have even claimed that sometimes that could be 3 to 5 times per unit, much more carbon heavy than any other type of transport that you can imagine. So that means that these companies, especially the Google of these words, or the Microsoft, the Facebook of these words, or the Chinese digital companies, are actually in the mood, in the necessity to actually push even more carbon neutrality. And in fact, that's what we see. We see that they use actually AI to solve their own problem, to make sure the cloud system or infrastructure is actually much more carbon neutral. I think Google has done that quite extensively lately. I think they reduce the cloud energy by 25%. And by the way, if you look at Amazon Web Services, already in 2015, they reduced by 25% already the use of energy. I think today that's at 50, 60. So bottom line, I think the point I'm making is that the politics sectors are yet to be AI savvy, but they're moving quite fast. The technology providers of AI are actually not yet necessarily energy efficient. They're moving quite fast into that, because they obviously have to preach what they do. And at the end of the day, I think these guys will obviously provide the services to these industries. And I guess that transport, energy, and resource extraction, hopefully in a few years' time, will be much more carbon neutral than they are today.
Thank you, Jacques. Yeah, I've been reading that digital technologies can enable a 20% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030. So that would save almost 10 times more the emissions that they produce. But yes, it is data energivores, let's say. And thank you for elaborating on this. I really think you mentioned quite well how the two legs of resilience for businesses in the future, and even starting now, is really digitalization on the one hand and carbon neutrality, or efforts to really improve sustainability. So thanks for that. I'd like to turn to you again, Ines, because I'm sure you have a few reactions after what you've heard. And how do you really see also the nexus from your position and you know, CEO of Digital for the Planet? How can companies and governments and citizens work towards, you know, this nexus of AI and sustainability together? Maybe there's some practices that you can tell us about.
So together, first we have to put in priority what we need mostly. But once we said that, we said nothing. We have to comprehend that the priority is the needs of citizens. Otherwise, it's just economy. We have to be sure that on a government level, that we use AI as a potential efficient tool, not as a systemic answer. Because in this case, it would be an opportunity more than to do the things right, and that's the most important today, because there is many tricks in the business of AI or blockchain. It doesn't have to be seen as an economic opportunity to make more business in the context we are living. It's an opportunity to make things right for the people, because the first one to suffer if we have a more serious climate change in the next year to come. But today we have many sectors when we can work together, both with companies, new companies to be created, and government. For example, energy production. We are talking a lot about this, but this is not something done. We can manage on better climate prediction, removal. We know that AI can do that now. And where it comes from, because it's nice to talk about CO2, but you have many sources and we also can do a lot with company government about education, solar, geo, and engineering, but finance, which is at the heart, at the center of the whole matter. We have to focus also on the energy efficient. This is something some often left aside, but this is something definitely prominent. And we are working Digital for the Planet currently with the big public French bank, but also better monitoring of deforestation and how can we. There is many debates about it nowadays, and I'm sure that companies and government can work together on this topic. Yes, that's what I would answer.
Okay, thank you so much, Ines. Turning to you again, Edward. So you've heard Ines share about how to raise awareness, and also mentioning how government and industry can work together. I'd like to know your take on how that is going, and what kind of policies do you see are really promising in supporting the use of and deployment of AI for beneficial purposes, you know, and support your the applications that you're deploying.
Oh yes, thank you very much for the question. I think we discussed how the organizations can work together towards this objective. So I do think to achieve the aims set out in the European Green Deal and the Sustainable Goals demands actions coming from all the sectors of the European economy. So the long-term vision is essential. And also we believe the connectivity is strictly linked with the accessibilities. So the proper training and upskilling of the workers should be in each agenda, so that they can actively take part in the renewable digitalized society. So I do think very important the skill set. This is one very important part. And also we suggest the policymakers to adopt a long-term vision of the environment. So the regulatory certainty for the industries and the businesses will bring more investment in the modernization and the reduction of the environmental impacts, and also building a strong acceptance with the stakeholders and embracing the opportunities connected to the digitalization for the climate change, clean energy and the circular economic transition, and also the energy management, water management, sustainable buildings, smart cities, digital-enabled sustainable transport technologies like we discussed. And that will ensure the unfolding of the Green Deal through the climate change and fully digital transition. So I think by doing all of this, our ambition can be met by aligning all the digital technologies, financing tools, and objectives. So that's just something in my mind at the moment.
Thank you. That's very useful. So you mentioned skills, long-term vision, investment as some things to really look after or really focus on. I'd like to ask you all one last question before picking a couple of questions from the participants. I'd like to know if you could sit down with a policymaker or maybe an investor, some stakeholder involved in this conversation, what would you say is the most pressing policy and business challenge, and what should be addressed as a first line of priority when it comes to AI for sustainable development? Jacques, perhaps you have a...
Yeah, I've got. Let me answer from a different angle, but and I will lead to your question, which is exactly what I like in the European institution new strategy framework. In one way, it's a two-pronged approach with the Green Deal and the Digital Deal. And in fact, if you look at the Digital Deal, it's actually moving to frontier technologies like AI and the like. And if you look at this, you said, look, AI, we try to catch up against China and against the US. It's difficult. We possibly have a better industrial perspective than the US, and possibly a most advanced manufacturing industry than China, so we can play there. And on top of that, we are possibly, and I think it has been said, we have actually citizens that are extremely caring and recognizing the necessity of sustainability. So which means that if we push that, while today the president of the US is not necessarily a fan of sustainability, and China obviously is possibly lagging behind still at this stage, given its industrial structure and its priorities in sustainability, we possibly have here a fantastic differentiation of European strategy where you can merge an AI catch-up into these sectors that are very industrialized, which are still the common industrial structure of Europe with energy, with agriculture, and you name it. And on the other side, we've got the sustainability value. So both of that create a fantastic impetus for Europe to be at the forefront of that. Now come the question about how do we realize that? Well, first of all, if I look at Europe, first questions will be speed. We have been there in Europe for quite a long time. We haven't basically achieved all the potential of the single market, and now we're moving to the digital single market. So speeding that digital single market as fast as we can is obviously part, and the AI rollout policies that we have put should be a first priority of the agenda. Second point, which is quite important, it's about competition. And obviously the European market has a competition law, but if you think about the sectors where we believe the opportunity is the biggest, it's called transport, it's called energy, and we all know that these sectors are pretty much owned by incumbents, and incumbents obviously don't like to be too much disrupted by this digital, that nexus of digitalization and digital attackers. So we have to basically fund and push those those streams of the economy to work. And I also believe that the economic competition law element will be quite fascinating. And last but not least, if we want AI to work, we need obviously to think about that from a 10 years point of view. That means a leadership model, which is not every 3 years we decide who else will do that. And we will have to do things like data. We need data, common data to work. And we possibly have to put institutions like the European institution, but why not on the global institution scale? We happen to have the CERN, we happen to have a few things in Europe that could be a role model to basically develop that global vision of what will be the technologies, but also the standards, the data sharing and the like to meet the objective of sustainability. So again, a lot to be done on the European side, but I think we've got the tool. Now we have to basically put a bit of sustainability and the AI nexus around the point of competition, global cooperation, and I think Europe can do very well indeed as a differentiation against the fight between the US and China.
Thank you, Jacques. So indeed, cooperation, competition, data sharing. Ines, what is your take on the most pressing challenge and top priority?
It has been said that if we want AI to work, we have to look at sustainability matters. I would say that if we want sustainability, we have to consider the best tool, and maybe AI can be one. In that sense, it's more appropriate to me, and it can be one. AI can be one of the tools needed for sustainability in conditionable itself. That's also what I'm fighting for, to make logic about AI more sustainable, less energy. So where I joined Jacques Buzyn is it's about cooperation in Europe. From the topics where they can find cooperation is digital ecology, of course. We are the most presumed to be on the line for sustainability if we regard US and China. Then data sovereignty for citizens, big topic also, and e-health. We have among Europe most of the most prestigious discovering about in Europe. So we have to capitalize on those three topics. Transversality, we have to work on sustainability in AI, so to have sustainable and cleaner or greener tools, technology tools, sustainability, so that there is no sense to use technology which is energy consuming to tackle change in all the sustainability problems. That will be my point of view and my angle.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us today. And perhaps one final word for you, Edward. You have 1 minute.
Yes, so I think the most important thing for us is try to have affordable AI services and AI solutions. I think in order to let everybody can use these general purpose technologies, that we are aiming to develop this full stack and all scenario solutions as a services to the public for all the people who can use that, who can access to that affordable and competitive solutions to use the latest technologies. We are aiming to do that. I think this is very important for the policy to encourage the use of the technologies, not only to limit the innovation on that. So that is from my perspective on that.
Excellent. Well, we did not collect many questions in the end, and now we're approaching the end of the session. So what I propose is that we end the session now. It's been a pleasure to hear all of your perspectives on the topic. It's never enough time. But now, thank you very much to all our panelists and the audience, to which I am announcing next up after the break. You will hear from exceptional panelists from the European Parliament, the EU Military Committee, the European Council on Foreign Relations, and NATO about how to achieve greater European strategic autonomy. We've heard data sovereignty in the session today, so there is some sort of a connection, but the angle will be on defense and security. So please do be back at 4 p.m. and tune in to enjoy the rest of the program. And once again, thank you all so much, panelists and participants, for making this session a success. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So yes, the public can work together with the private sector to secure